So we have seen this going around. The Trump administration planning to exclude some professional degrees as being professions, and they're doing this on purpose. And just about all of the professions are typically female dominated professions. But where is this coming from? The people behind all of this is the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation are the people that are responsible for Project 2025. They can go full mask off now that Donald Trump is in office, and they are set out to implement what is going on in Project 2025. They think that harming women's professions, they think that harming women's money is how they are going to increase the birth rate, because they're going to attempt to drive women back to the home. This came out November 15th. Education policy reforms are key strategies for increasing the married birth rate. They're doing this on purpose to drive women back into the home and back to being married and pregnant. They want to strip our rights piece by piece. And some people acted like Project 2025 wasn't real. And some people acted like, both sides are the same and all of that. So this PDF is long. This report is long, but I am going to read it to you. The fertility rate in the United States has dropped to 1.6, an all-time low, and far below the 2.1 replacement rate required to maintain steady population. Fertility rates are dropping worldwide and are proving resistant to a variety of policy efforts to reverse the trend. While no silver bullet can increase the married birth rate, you see they say married birth rate. They don't want people having kids outside of marriage. The married birth rate, developing pro-family policies is essential if Americans want to maintain their political and cultural traditions, avoid economic decline, and strengthen national defense. While most pro-fertility policies focus directly on addressing the costs associated with children by providing financial incentives and subsidized services, those measures have shown limited success. The decline in the number of children is driven primarily by values and priorities. Having and raising children can be expensive, but that has always been true. People had more babies when the standards of living were much lower than today. In 1970, a decade after the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the birth control pill, and long after children were needed to work on farms, the fertility rate in the United States was 2.5, even though per capita GDP was almost 1/3 of what it is today. Now that society has become richer, people have greater financial resources to cover the cost of having children, but they have decreased inclination to use their resources in that way. Although the general standard of living and overall societal wealth is greater than it was a century ago, that may be a double-edged sword where it comes to fertility, as wealthier countries tend to delay marriage and family formation and have lower overall fertility. The average age of marriage in America in 1960 was 22.8 for men and 20.3 for women. It's now 30.5 and 28.6 respectively. Much of this trend can be explained by the subsidy-induced explosion in the amount of time people spend in higher education, where married students are far from the norm, and young student parents are practically non-existent on American campuses. Put plainly, massive and unnecessary education subsidies are artificially steering people into delaying or even foregoing marriage and children. For both men and women, the uptick in college enrollment is not necessarily a function of increasing skills and education required in the job market. For example, 33% of secretaries hold a bachelor's degree today, compared to just 9% in 1990. Increased college enrollment has come in the wake of ever-increasing federal subsidies and access credentialing requirements. Spending more years in higher education often means delaying many traditional markers of adulthood, such as getting a job, getting married, and ultimately having children. Postponing having children until later in life also tends to mean having fewer children. Finally, to reverse the tide of declining fertility rates, it is necessary to consider barriers to parents educating their own children in ways that increase the likelihood that those children will have pro-fertility values. Needed reforms on this score include universal education choice at the K through 12 level to enable all families to have the option of choosing private, home, or religious schools for their children. Religion and fertility rates. The decline in fertility rates in the United States is driven largely by a decline in religiosity. Among people who attend religious services at least once per week, fertility rates show no evidence of a long-term decline, fluctuating between 2 and 2.4 children per woman since 1982. Among the non-religious, however, fertility rates are significantly lower, and the proportion of Americans who do not engage in any weekly religious activity has been growing dramatically. According to Lyman Stone at the Institute for Family Studies, these two factors, low fertility rates among the non-religious and their growing share of the population, account for virtually 100% of the decline in fertility in the United States from 2012 to 2019. Countries with higher rates of religious observance do not necessarily have higher fertility rates, since country-level differences in politics, economics, and culture also influence how many children people have. But in studies from many developed countries, research shows that at the individual level, religious practices exert a strong and positive effect on fertility. So religiosity explains variation in fertility within countries, even if it does not account for variations across countries. According to researchers Charla Lampos Dantes, Esther Lucia Riza, and Thomas Baudin, the mechanism by which religiosity promotes fertility is that it alters perceived cost-benefit calculations. Religious people see more benefit in having children and are less concerned about the cost associated with children. As one study put it, the results show that part of the positive effect of the religiosity of fertility intentions can be explained by more religious people seeing higher benefits of having children. Furthermore, but only in the case of women, religiosity moderates the impact of perceived cost on fertility intentions, suggesting that the effect of perceived cost decreases with increasing religiosity. To translate this into non-technical language, religion does not change the cost associated with children, but it does change people's values so that they more greatly appreciate the personal, societal, and even eternal benefits of having more babies and are willing to allocate more of their family resources towards children. In the United States, the government may not enact policies that establish a national religion, but it is entirely appropriate to alter policies that hinder or burden religiosity. When the government compels parents to enroll their children in school, and then provides secular public schools as the only tax-supported option, it is erecting a significant barrier to parents giving children a religious education. Families must be able to afford to pay twice, once in taxes supporting the district public schools, and a second time for private school tuition to be able to access instruction that matches their faith and values. But school choice policies that place religious schools on a level playing field with secular options allow parents to choose a religious education for their children on an equal basis. Making religious education available on equal terms with secular education is likely to help stem the long-term decline in religious belief and practice. Students who attend religious schools are more likely to engage in religious activities as they grow older than similarly situated students who attend secular schools, and also tend to have better education and life outcomes. Education savings accounts, tax credit supported private school scholarships, and vouchers should be viewed as pro-fertility policies, lowering barriers to families selecting a school of their choice, including religious education for their children, increases the odds that parents will have children and that a larger share of those children will retain religious beliefs and practices that boost marriage and fertility. So this is about halfway through. I'm going to make a part 2 and continue it at earlier family formations and fertility. This is part 2 of me reading this Heritage Foundation document. Education policy reforms are key strategies for increasing the married birth rate. This is part 2, and this is where I left off. Earlier family formation and fertility. Fertility is significantly reduced for people who delay the age at which they start working, forming families, and having children. In 2021, the median age of women in the United States who have had a child for the first time was 27.3, up from 21.4 in 1970. The older that women are when they start having children, the fewer children they tend to have. And the older that women are who do not have children, the more likely it is that they will never have children. The average age of men when they first become fathers is also increasing, as is the average age at which people get married. In 1960, the median age for first marriage, we already read through that. Why are they doing that again? Anyways, I'm skipping to right here. Many factors have contributed to delaying the start of family formation until older ages, but one of the most important is the longer period of time that people spend in school. A majority of men and women now take more than 4 years to complete a bachelor's degree. Just 46.6% of the 2017-2018 college cohort completed their bachelor's degree in 4 years. 63.4% completed the degree in 6 years. When people take more time to attain a degree, they are more than likely to postpone starting a family. At the same time, enrollment in graduate programs increased by 5% between 2010 and 2019, and increased another 5% by 2021. This increase from 2.9 million to 3.2 million students came in the wake of the Grad Plus federal loan program, established in 2006. With the advent of Grad Plus, students became eligible to receive subsidized federal loans for graduate programs up to the cost of attendance. This has likely played a key role in boosting enrollment in graduate school. Spending 2 years to obtain a master's degree and 4 or more years pursuing a PhD or professional degree means, on the low end, that people are spending 6 to 10 years in higher education. Most of them put off marriage and childbearing during that time. The longer it takes for people to complete their education, the longer they delay pursuing employment, and the older they are when they start to seek spouses and think about having children. Among women with a post-secondary degree who have children, 42.9% have their first child when they are 30 or older. Among women with only a high school degree who have children, only 8.5% wait until they are older than 30 to have their first child. Among women with a bachelor's degree or higher, 21.8% will never have children, compared to 11.5% among those who ended their formal education with a high school diploma. Ease of healthy reproduction peaks around 25. This is a lie, around 25, and naturally drops with age, accelerating dramatically throughout the 30s. Pregnancy complications also increase with age, which leads to greater C-section deliveries, which in turn dramatically limits the number of additional births without complication or need of C-section. The fact that they conflated all of this in they're talking about professional degrees, and then they're also talking about when people are having babies. This was supposedly written by 2 authors with PhDs. This is wild work to me that they put all of this in that one paragraph. Of course, expanded access to education and work opportunities has improved the career options available to everyone over the past several decades. But if businesses are chasing degrees instead of fulfilling job requirements, they are needlessly imposing costly higher education requirements on both men and women. Part of the problem is that overzealous civil rights enforcement by regulators has made it exceedingly difficult for businesses to administer job-related pre-employment tests. So businesses require degrees as a poor substitute. In addition, state regulators require an excessive amount of licensing and credentialing for professions that do not need to be backed by particular degrees. Skills, knowledge, aptitude, and mentoring are more important than degrees that do not guarantee those traits. Finally, if the government provides excessively generous subsidies for higher education, women and men are being artificially pushed away from work and into more years in school because they do not want to leave those tax dollars on the table. Ironically, those free tax dollars mostly come in the form of loan subsidies and therefore tempt students to take on far more debt than necessary, leaving them trapped in a debt burden they did not prepare for, thus further delaying family formation. This is because more years of schooling often do not necessarily translate into better economic opportunities. For example, of those Americans with student loans, 42% hold an associate's degree or less. 17% of borrowers holding student loan debt are in the bottom quartile of earners. More than half of college graduates are employed in jobs that do not require a college degree. A majority of graduates at 852 colleges, 22% of all colleges earn less than $15 an hour. At more than a quarter of colleges, 1,022 of 3,887 institutions, a majority of graduates earn less than the average high school graduate up to a full decade into their careers. Fewer than half, 49% of all students, complete their bachelor's degree within 4 years, a figure that drops to 29% for Black students. The fact that they called out Black students is hilarious. Okay. Approximately 62% of bachelor degree seekers complete their 4-year degree in 6 years. And graduate school fails to pay off on average, with the net financial value being modest to negative for most graduate degrees. Although half of medical degrees have a return on investment of more than $1 million, 40% of master degrees have no net financial value. These sobering statistics call into question the value of more Americans spending more time on more credentialing, especially when it appears to lead to delayed family formation and entry into adult life. Education policy changes can help to stem the tide of declining fertility rates by ending governmental inducements to delay entry into the workforce, staying in school longer, getting trapped with debt, and postponing family formation. Young people are driven by public policy to stay in school longer than they otherwise might. Heavily subsidized student loans and repeated offers of debt cancellation that may or may not materialize provide young people with strong incentives to remain in school longer than necessary rather than complete their education and find a job. People who start working at younger ages are more likely to get married younger and have more children. Limiting student loan inducements will level the playing field between school and work, allowing more people to pursue work and start families at younger ages, resulting in a higher married birth rate. The way they connected these dots is so crazy. If we keep people out of school, they're just going to get married and then they're going to have more kids. The fact that they think that this is going to happen is ridiculous to me, but okay. In addition, government licensing requirements and access credentialing requirements for government jobs also push young people to stay in school longer than they otherwise would. Again, eliminating these policies that tip the scale towards staying in school longer would allow people to make the choice to start work earlier, get married sooner, and increase the married fertility rate. Proposals to cut subsidized student loan programs should therefore be seen as pro-fertility policies. We just had to get to that. The reason why they are doing this, the reason why many female-coded careers are being cut as far as what is professional or not, is because they need women to get pregnant. An education reform agenda to increase married birth rate and support families. Congress and the states have a role to play in leveling the playing field between public and private education, between work and higher education. To increase the married birth rates, states should adopt universal school choice. State policymakers should adopt universal education choice options to put religious and private schools on a level playing field with secular and government-run options, allowing families to choose an education for their children that matches their goals and values. Today, more than 30 states plus Washington, D.C. have enacted some form of school choice. Notably, 11 states adopted universal school choice in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, meaning that every single child in those 11 states can choose to enroll in private school instead of being assigned to a district public school. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to make this a part 3 in this education reform agenda part. Still working my way through this Heritage Foundation policy paper. Education policy reforms are key strategies for increasing the married birth rate. And these two people, Jay Green and Lindsay Burke, both supposedly have a PhD. We need to figure out where their PhD is from. It's probably Liberty University. All right, so I left off in this education reform agenda to increase the married birth rate. So it says every state should adopt universal school choice, either through education savings accounts, tax credit scholarships, refundable use tax credits, or school vouchers, funding families directly and allowing them to choose learning options that are the right fit for them and align with their values. Expanding access to religious schooling increases exposure to the types of education where students are more likely to hear about concepts such as success sequence, reinforcing the importance of the success of life milestones, graduating high school, getting married, and getting a job before having children. Eliminate teacher certification requirements for public schools. Oh my goodness, okay. More than 3.6 million K through 12 teachers are working in the United States, which is more than the combined number of doctors, 816,900, and lawyers, 826,300 in America. Easing certification requirements for teachers could have a positive effect on a non-trivial percentage of the American workforce. University-based teacher certification is notoriously ineffective. A teacher certification status upon classroom entry has negligible influence on student academic performance and varies little by program type. University-based School of Education certification versus alternative teacher certification programs. Teacher certification fails to predict effectiveness. However, differences in teacher effectiveness within the three groups of certified, alternatively certified, and uncertified teachers are large. The difference between the 75th percentile teacher and the 50th percentile teacher for all three groups of teachers being roughly 5 times as large as the difference between the average certified teacher and the average uncertified teacher. Yet, state certification requirements create another barrier to the workforce that may delay family formation. States should eliminate requirements for would-be teachers to obtain certification and should instead empower school leaders and principals to hire educators whom they deem to have sufficient subject matter expertise to teach in K through 12 classrooms. Oh my goodness, they just want anybody to be in y'all's kids' classrooms. This is where this is bad. This is not good. Eliminate bachelor degree requirements for state government work. In both the public and private sector, employers should move away from the bachelor's degree as a filter for hiring employees when appropriate. For their part, state leaders should eliminate bachelor's degree requirements in public sector positions, as some, such as Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, have already done. Congress should curtail federal higher education subsidies by eliminating Grad Plus loans. Over the past 3 decades, federal higher education subsidies have increased dramatically, with spending on student loans rising by 328%. Federal subsidies now top $150 billion annually. These subsidies have also pushed up the price of college. Tuition and fees for in-state students attending four-year universities have nearly tripled in real terms since 1990. Since 1970, inflation-adjusted tuition rates have quintupled at both public and private colleges. Not only have federal subsidies enabled colleges to raise prices, but also, particularly in the case of loans for graduate students, they have encouraged Americans to spend years in graduate school. Historically, few Americans pursue graduate-level work. In 1900, just 6,000 people were enrolled in graduate school. We're going all the way back to 1900. That's what they just did. All right, there were 6,000 people enrolled in graduate school in the United States, and just 300 PhDs were awarded annually. Today, nearly 195,000 doctoral degrees are awarded each year. One can observe similar trends with the conferral of master's degrees, which went from about 1,500 in 1900 to more than 866,000 annually today. For both master's and doctoral programs, one also sees a notable increase in conferrals from 2009 to 2020, increasing from 693,000 to 866,000 in the case of master's degrees, and from 158,000 to 194,000 in the case of doctoral degrees, following the introduction of the Graduate Plus Loan Program in 2006. In order to drive down cost and protect taxpayers, Congress should eliminate the Plus Loan Program, both the Parent Plus and Grad Plus components. Those pursuing in-demand fields with high ROI, such as degrees in the legal or medical fields, will be able to secure a loan in the private market with a reasonable interest rate. Taxpayers should not be on the hook for those pursuing low ROI fields, such as master's degrees in communications. Individuals who want to pursue such degrees, absent federal loans, will be able to secure a loan in the private market with terms that reflect the risk associated with the field of study. And student loan cancellation. Student loan cancellation further places the federal thumb on the scale that signals what Americans should do upon high school graduation. It is expensive, regressive, and unfair to those who repaid their loans and to those who worked before college or decided to forego college to avoid being saddled with debt. Moreover, debt amnesty further encourages young Americans to enroll in college or graduate school, confident that debt cancellation history will repeat itself, even if they would have been better served by pursuing other paths. Debt amnesty mass market signals, removing the responsibility of the borrower from repaying the loan and removing the incentive to investigate whether a given degree or course of study has a worthwhile ROI. Loan cancellation also raises taxes on working families, forcing them to pay off other people's loans. The next administration should reverse remaining Biden administration regulations under the Saving on Valuable Education or SAVE plan. Saving on a Valuable Education or SAVE plan. I am totally sure I have heard Donald Trump say something about the SAVE plan. Ending the administration's lawless efforts to forgive student loans. At the same time, Congress should end public service loan forgiveness. Oh my goodness, which unfairly rewards those who prefer government or nonprofit work over private employment. Revive industry-recognized apprenticeship programs to expand apprenticeships. IRAPs established during the Trump administration directed the Department of Labor to propose regulations to support third-party apprenticeship programs. These IRAPs include paid work in a given industry, along with education that results in an industry-recognized credential. As a former and current Heritage Foundation fellows Paul Winfrey and Rachel Gressler respectively note, this quickly led to more than 130 new apprenticeship programs, predominantly in high-demand fields with worker shortages. The Biden administration, however, canceled the effort. Reviving IRAPs would provide an additional pathway to middle class, enabling young Americans to enter adulthood sooner without having to spend unnecessary years in higher education. Conclusion. Expensive and misguided government interventions in education are, whether intended or not, pushing young people away from getting married and starting families to the long-term detriment of American society. Implementing the above suggested reforms to remove these barriers could have a significant positive effect on boosting the married fertility rate. Policy should empower parents to raise their children according to their values and should remain neutral on the types of post-secondary paths that students pursue. increasing access to private and religious education through expanded school choice, removing excess credentialing barriers for teaching and state jobs, and reducing federal higher education subsidies and loan cancellation that place the federal thumb on the scale in favor of spending years in post-secondary work of questionable value will help young Americans to start and expand their families. I'll end it there. That's the conclusion. But let me know what you think. Do you think stripping all of these educational options will push women back into marriage, back into religion, and back into popping out these babies? Let me know what you think.
Yesterday, we got the clearest picture yet about what the Department of Education is going to officially consider a professional degree versus a graduate degree. And now, why is this important? Is because starting on July 1st, 2026, the borrowing limits change whether you are going to a graduate school program or you are going to a professional school program. Remember, you can borrow up to $20,500 for graduate school per year or up to $100,000 in total. Or if you're going to professional school, it's $50,000 a year up to $200,000 total. Now, the Undersecretary of Education came to the negotiated rulemaking committee yesterday afternoon and presented a list of what they are considering professional degrees. And I'm going to move my head to the side here. You can see them all broken down. We have law, medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, veterinary medicine, optometry, podiatric medicine, clinical psychology, chiropractic, and theology or divinity. This is not the final list. However, it is getting closer and closer to being finalized. And honestly, this is not very far off from what we expected the definitions to be. Clinical psychology got added. That was really the only change that we saw. So if you are planning on going to graduate or professional school next year, this is the list that you're going to need to know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And of course, we will bring you the final when it's approved and put into rules, but they are still doing the negotiated rulemaking committee today and tomorrow. And so we might hear more, but we will keep you updated as we get it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as please always like, subscribe, and follow, and we'll bring you the latest on higher education and personal finance news.